Hi, I have some different words for the chalice lighting that Dave Showalter found um, when we were talking earlier this week. It's called The Chalice is a Symbol. It's by Deborah Falk. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice, a faith that visions a world flourishing with equality for all her people, a faith that demands the living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith of wholeness. This tiny flame is the symbol of the spark of all this within each of us. Thank you.
Good morning, class.
Good morning, Miss Class.
What are we learning about today?
Purim.
Cameras on, everyone. Purim is a story we retell every year, a joyous celebration of overcoming fear. Haman tried to kill us, but he lost and we're still here, inspiring generations with a tale we all can cheer.
But please don't talk about the massacre hidden at the end of the book.
Massacre? Did he say massacre?
You can skip right by it without even a second look. It's a bit too gory to conclude our story, so we just don't talk about what happens at the end of the book.
Miss Trevex, I have a question.
Oh, shut up, Harold.
Please don't talk about the carnage hidden at the end of the tale.
Excuse me, could everyone please mute themselves?
Most Jews don't even know it that well. So, Haman's thriller is the end of our Megillah, because we just don't talk about what happens at the end of the book.
It's a story of perseverance, and to thine own self be true.
It teaches glory. It teaches spirit.
It teaches do unto them before they do unto you.
Why not focus on the bravery and courage in our heroes of old? Mordechai, Esther, King Achashverosh. It was all preemptive, call it self-defensive, and we just won't talk about what happens at the end of the book.
Purim is a celebration. Singing, dancing, and wine.
Wear a costume, tell the story.
As long as you cut off that chapter 9.
Please don't talk about the bloodshed hidden at the end of the book. It's just an alternate ending we all try to overlook.
I wrote fan fiction where Cinderella turns into a vampire.
It's Jewish Harry Potter, but the ending's quite a shocker.
I love Harry Potter.
So we just don't talk about what happens at the end of the book.
Please don't
didn't even happen.
But just in case we don't talk about what happens at the end of the book.
All right, well, that was certainly an interesting class. For next week, your homework is to practice the Zion Het and final Het letters in your workbook. And please don't forget your permission slips for our upcoming field trip to see Fiddler on the Roof 2, Raising the Roof. Thanks for a lovely class. Okay, bye!
Good morning, everyone. I'm Evan Wilson, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you all today. So welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester's online Sunday morning worship service. We are glad that you have joined us virtually this morning. It is an act of love that we gather in this way during this time of pandemic response. We hope that this service gives you an opportunity to pause for a few minutes, to gather in community so that we might care for each other. Take a moment to reflect on our own well-being, discover opportunities for spiritual refreshment and service in the wider world, even as we are at a personal distance. We will gather this way through the winter. Through the next few months, our religious exploration program will be offering opportunities for children and youth to gather virtually as well. Please visit www.uucworcester.org for more opportunities on these get-togethers, as well as other opportunities to meet for discussion and support. For safety purposes, and so that we might come to know you better, as you are able, please list your name on your video feed. Please note that the service is being live streamed on Facebook and is being recorded for future availability on the church YouTube channel, as well as our website, Worship Archive. Following the service this morning, you are invited to join us for a virtual fellowship hour. Once again, welcome and thank you for joining us this morning.
Our opening words this morning are those of my colleague, the Reverend Burton Carley. We gather on this Sabbath morn to worship in spirit and truth. We raise a joyful noise to the eternal mystery, to reconfirm our covenant to seek wisdom and love, to strengthen our commitment to the common good. We come with many paths to explore that which is hidden, to consider the ways of our hearts, to confess how we have stumbled, to heal what is broken. We assemble in an effort to quicken our compassion and mercy, to deepen our understanding, to renew our courage, to remember who we are. Thus do we celebrate the grace and gift of life and the practice of our faith to the greater glory of the Spirit. Please join in your own place our opening hymn, number 1 in our gray hymnal, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door.
Thank
want to invite Robin Mickiewicz, our Director of Religious Exploration, to share with us our religious exploration moment this morning.
Thank you, Aaron. And good morning, everybody. My name is Robin Mickiewicz. This morning, as we meet with our young people, we are discussing the notion of equality versus equity versus fairness. And we read this book, We Came to America. And using cookie making as an example of what the meaning of equality, equity, and fairness, we discovered that even though we may all have one cookie sitting in front of us and feel like it's fair, that different people have different needs, and we should recognize those needs. In order to have radical hospitality, knowing that we each need to meet many different needs for others in order to create fairness. In order to create true equity, we need to look at the whole person. So we got to learn those hard facts while eating cookies, and so that was a win. Another thing I'd like to bring to your attention is we're getting ready to roll out our coming of age program for next year, and that takes a lot of front work, identifying mentors and planning for unknown gatherings, what we can do and what we can't do. So we're starting that prospect, and we are looking forward to our new coming of age group. And as usual, we meet every Sunday with the youth group. And right now we're planning our youth group service, which is coming up next month. So we're excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. I'd like to now invite Diane Mann to share with us this morning's reading.
Good morning, everybody. The reading this morning is Not Your Neighbor's Halloween by Sherry Bernstein. Once a year in the spring, Jews celebrate and sing in costumes of disguise, a past victory over a wicked man's demise. Haman was the evil man with a crooked nose and a devilish plan. On Purim, we will wipe out any and all Jews who roam about. But Mordecai was most near, so Haman's awful plan he did hear. A brave man, he rallied the Jews to fight Haman, to refuse to lose. To his cousin Esther he did beseech, to overthrow Haman is in your reach. The king does love you, it is true, so just tell him you're a Jew. He may cry, he may fuss, but really you simply must. Queen Esther did fear for her life, as the king did kill his previous wife. But what choice have I? The time to save our people is nigh. So to the king our Esther spoke, and informed him she was of Jewish folk. If your chief Haman has his way, Jews will not live to see another day. My beautiful Esther, behold, I will put that wicked Haman on the scaffold. I declare Mordecai my new chief. May this war to defend Judaism be brief. Each year we celebrate our success with Hamantash and cookies meant to jest. These treats make fun of Haman's ears from where he hanged while others gave cheers. Each year we dress up and pretend like our Queen Esther did for our Judaism to defend. We stomp and pounce wherever Haman's name is announced. We drink and read from the Megillah, do we heed? For it is vital to know our Judaism will never go. In Persia is this tale begun, And in modern times, it is there with guns, for on Purim in 1991, the Gulf War ended under a Persian sun. So every year we must reenact to remind us as Jews to act. For many people would love nothing more than to end our lives, to show us the door. And while Purim comes sans trick or treats, without broomsticks or sorcerer's feats, our day comes with its own form of sweet, remembering who we are and Haman's blessing defeat.
Thank you, Diane. We come to that time in our service when we're given an opportunity to share that which is symbolic of our own efforts, our own values. The things in the world that we matter most to us are symbolized by that which we gather unto ourselves and that which we are capable of sharing in order that the communities that we belong to and love and work within can thrive. And so it is that we take up an offering each time that we come together for worship. You are invited to share your offering this morning by either texting 508-231-5335 or by visiting www.uucworcester.org/donate. At this time, our morning offering will be received. We come to that time in our service when we're given pause to consider what is deepest in our hearts or most profoundly on our minds, or in the work of our hands in the days that have transpired or in the prospect of days to come. Joys and sorrows that touch us deeply and are given another measure of meaning because of our capacity to share them in the midst of a company that claims us as a co-journeyer. So I invite those of you who have joys or sorrows to share this morning to open your microphone so that I might call on you in turn. Or if you would like to have your joy or sorrow read by me, please place it in the chat, preceded by the words, please read, so that I can find it quickly. Are there joys or sorrows to be shared this day? Pauline?
Oh, good morning. I just have a couple of things. I got my real ID after kind of tumbling over a few requirements. I also got my first COVID shot. And I think the most important thing for me right now was that Carol Howe loaned me a book called Wide Neighborhoods about Mary Breckenridge. I, before this book, had no idea how much midwifery entertained. It has so many avenues and so many different jobs that people have to do who are midwives. And I really appreciate having read all about that. Thanks, Carol.
And thank you. Beth Posner Waldron writes that one of our newcomers, Sarah Montanero, is in Italy with her family mourning the loss of her mother to a sudden illness. So we paused this morning to send Susan and her family much and abiding, very poignant and precious time. In addition, Kyle writes to us on Facebook that he started a new job and is enjoying more than anything. He had been struggling with work before now, but has found something to enjoy and can make a career out of. Feels lucky to secure a new good job with everything crazy that's going on right now. So we celebrate Kyle's new job this morning as well. Are there other joys or sorrows to be shared today? So we're going to return to our slides for this joy and announcement from Rachel Keogh.
Hello. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Rachel Keogh. I am here today to share with you the details of a discussion that has started to grow momentum within our congregation. That is the adoption of the 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism, which seeks to build a beloved community by dismantling racism and other oppressions. Our 7 principles, which are familiar to most, are our common belief and agreement on how we choose to be together in community. The 8th principle would be evidence that we are committed to dismantling systemic racism and holds us accountable to implement this into our practice. The 8th principle is as follows. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. In 1997, the General Assembly passed a resolution to integrate this commitment of the 8th principle into our practices, thus creating a movement and urged congregations to do the same. To further this work, the 8th principle was introduced in 2013 for consideration by congregations and the association, which are now preparing to consider adoption in 2022. As UUs are rooted in social justice, we have a duty to take the time to understand the systems that may have been shaped by white supremacy and find ways to dismantle them. We have to address our own prejudices in order to get past them. This will mean having uncomfortable, difficult conversations during this period of growth. Some may say that because UUs are rooted in social justice and already believe that dismantling white supremacy and systemic racism is inherent in our faith, then why must we choose to adopt the eighth principle and explicitly state this in our covenant? Well, it is because the eighth principle is evidence that we are committed to doing this work. As explained on the eighth principle website, eighthprincipleuu.org, a person can believe they are being good UUs and following the 7 principles without even thinking about or dealing with racism or other oppressions. The eighth principle corrects this by holding us accountable to our commitment. Over the next several months, we will hold conversations, watch films, possibly hold a speaker series, partner with community organizations to provide educational opportunities to discuss, grow, and learn. We will then present the adoption of the eighth principle as a congregational vote in June 2022 during our annual meeting. We invite your questions, your comments, and your concerns. Please feel free to contact me, Karen Stevenson, Mara Pentlarge, Evan Wilson, and Dave Showalter to share your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I'm pleased to see this announcement, and I want you and the group to know that your minister is very much behind this effort and applauds you for bringing it forward to the congregation. I look forward to the coming months as an opportunity for us to explore the eighth principle and all that it points to, and hope that it is a very generative set of discussions and opportunities for people to learn more. So thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
I want to conclude our joys and sorrows this morning. Maddie Barnard writes that she got into grad school and she got a job offer. So we offer our congratulations to Maddie this morning as we enter into a time of prayer and meditation. O Holy One, we come together this morning with gladness in our hearts for the presence of each other, for the sharing of that which gives us joy and which continues to challenge us to think and behave in the world in a way that addresses that which subjugates and causes suffering. We are gladdened by the experience of a community that welcomes us with joy, open arms, with a vision of all that is yet possible when we gather together in common ethic and common cause. Grateful this morning also for the opportunities that have been shared with us for new work, for ongoing education, for the opportunity to find ourselves deeply rooted in the communities and in the world that we share and serve. Help us be mindful of the privilege of our being and of the responsibility that we carry within us to help establish those environments where all life can flourish. We would gather this way as often as we can to remain mindful of that which is most precious to us, the world, each other, our own selves, all those who we have yet to meet and greet and invite into deep and abiding relationship. For all that is true, right, real, and good this day, we give great and abiding thanks. Amen, and blessed be. The book of Esther, a book of the Hebrew Bible, belongs to the third section of the Judaic canon known as the Ketuvim, or the writings. In Hebrew scripture, Esther follows Ecclesiastes and Lamentations and is read on the festival of Purim, which commemorates the rescue of Jews from Haman's plottings. The book of Esther is one of the Megillot, the 5 scrolls read on stated Jewish religious holidays. The book purports to explain how the Feast of Purim came to be celebrated by the Jewish community. Esther, it is explained, is a beautiful Jewish wife of the Persian king Assyrius, who is also known as Xerxes I. And her cousin Mordecai persuade the king to retract an order for the general annihilation of the Jews throughout the empire. The massacre had been plotted by the king's chief minister, Haman, and the date decided by the casting of lots, or Purim. Instead, as the story explains, Haman was hanged on the gallows he built for Mordecai, and on the day planned for their annihilation, the Jews destroyed their enemies. According to the book of Esther, the Feast of Purim was established to celebrate that day. It's a well-known story in both Jewish and Christian traditions. In Jewish circles, it's a festive holiday that often includes raucous celebration, wherein the story of Esther is told in the style of a melodrama, where when her name is mentioned, there is loud cheering, whereas when Haman comes on the scene, the boos and the stomps take over. Among scholars, there is much debate about the meaning of the book. It is the only book in Hebrew scripture that does not mention the word God. Furthermore, circumstances of the account recorded in its pages seem to be almost pure fiction. Listen to Reuven Hammer, the former president of the International Rabbinic Assembly, who describes the conundrum, writing, "The book itself is in disguise. It pretends to be the story of triumph and victory of diaspora Jews, but is it really? Most biblical scholars today view the book as historical fiction rather than a book of history. Some see it as a comedy, a book written to accompany a Persian carnival holiday, and indeed it has more comedy than other biblical books. But I would add, however, that it's not merely a comedy or a farce, but a black comedy, that which could be called to cause of bitter laughter. There is really nothing funny about the possibility of exterminating all the Jews, men, women, and children, as Haman proposes to do, nor is their salvation totally believable. Can we seriously be asked to believe that the Persian king gave permission to the Jews to kill 75,000 of his own people? When the life of Jews in Persia depends on the outcome of a beauty contest, on the fact that Haman falls on Esther on a couch and on a eunuch reminding the befuddled king that there is a stake he could use to impale Haman. Is it really plausible victory? The line between the survival of the Jews and their total destruction was very thin. Should Jews depend on something like that, or should they look to leave Persia? The story seems to be saying that Jews can live in diaspora community like Persia in safety, and if threatened, they can always be saved. But underneath the surface, the true message seems to be that they are saved only by chance. Is it wise to depend on such things? I know that many interpret the story as teaching that God intervened in secret behind the scenes. It seems to me that biblical books have no problem in telling us when God intervenes. If that's the case here, why hide it? If God does not appear in the book even once, there must be good reason, says the rabbi. Rabbi Hammer's analysis that this is a book about a heroine whose very name, Esther, in Hebrew, Ishtar, means hidden, is really a book itself in disguise. Suggests that we have to dig beneath the surface of the text to understand what it is that the book actually reflects. For instance, and here Rabbi Reuven notes again, Esther hides her real name, Hadassah, and she hides her Jewish identity. She lives in a palace as if she were a good Persian girl. If she practiced her Judaism there, she did so in secret. The irony is that she hides her Jewish identity at the behest of Mordecai, the public Jew. Why does he urge her to do that? Why does he want her to hide her Jewish identity and become the first Mariano, as it were? It's not accidental to the hidden Jews of Spain and Portugal, for Esther became their patron saint. No explanation is given for Mordecai's urging her to pretend to become something else. Was he afraid that she would be harmed if they knew she was a Jew? Nothing is said on that point about the danger to Jews. Was he afraid that if it were known she would not be chosen? Why would he even want her to be chosen in the first place, to become the concubine, not even the wife of a pagan monarch? Later on, he says that perhaps she attained her important position so that she could save the Jews. But he didn't have that in mind at the beginning. It doesn't seem so, but did he have that in mind in the beginning? It doesn't seem so. So I ask, what does the book actually address? Some scholars argue that the book was written much later than the actual story itself would suggest. According to recent research, the Book of Esther was written in the middle of the 4th century BCE during the reign of Xerxes III. However, the absence of Persian sources of any references to a king that had a Jewish consort create a new problem. Some scholars contend that given the striking resemblance between the names Esther and Mordecai to the Babylonian deities Marduk and Ishtar, the story was rooted in Babylonian worship practices, which the Jews would have adopted and transformed into the story of Esther. Well-known German Jewish historian Heinrich Graetz, for example, argued that the Book of Esther was written at the time of the Maccabean struggle from 167 to 160 BCE against Antiochus IV Epiphanes, in order to boost the spirit of the Jews at that critical time and to show that God does not abandon its people. For me, what seems clear is that the story which was meant for the ears was a story that which was meant for the ears of a subjugated people, those whose lives were controlled by foreign powers and whose livelihoods depended on how well they were able to negotiate the power structures of the controlling forces. Suggesting that this story is fundamentally of the superhero genre, a genre we will explore more fully next Sunday when we kick off our next stewardship campaign. In order to understand the meaning behind such a story, consider one commentator's reflections on the recent movie Black Panther. The film sets up a number of dichotomies from a philosophical point of view: isolationism versus colonialism, national versus a Pan-African racial identity, and ethnocentrism versus internationalism. More importantly, it spoke to the dual consciousness and the nuances of the African diaspora. In the opening narration, we're told of how the nation of Wakanda's development was affected by the presence of the valuable mineral vibranium, and how Wakanda pursued the policy of isolation due to the desire to maintain its traditions and nationalism, while elsewhere we see the rise of colonialism, slavery, and wars of conquest across the globe. The film quickly and purposefully transitions to a flashback to 1992 Oakland, California to set the tone. We're introduced to the main villain's father, Najabu, as he's planning an armed assault on the California National Guard in response to the beating of Rodney King and the Los Angeles uprising that ensued. Njabu is the brother of King T'Chaka, who is the titular Black Panther's father. Once King T'Chaka, the former Panther, discovers Njobo's plan and the theft of the vibranium, the prince eloquently defends his radicalization, a defense that in 15 seconds encapsulates the injustice and despair America has imposed on Black people here. He becomes radicalized by his experiences of racial discrimination, the drug war in Black neighborhoods, over-policing, systemic poverty, and redlining, and arrives at a solution that Wakanda's advanced technology should serve the purpose of liberating oppressed African people across the globe in what would amount to a global racial revolution, in some countries an outright race riot. Despite the horrible implications and reality of his plan, his goal is simple: liberation. Something that's not unreasonable, historically speaking. The scene sets up the important conversations that say more about our present-day America than Marvel's fictional universe. America doesn't care about Black people. It never has. It has to be pushed to do so. Therefore, the question is, how do we create that better society? The idea of whether or not to use the armed self-defense to fight for civil rights and liberation has been an ongoing historical dilemma for African Americans and other oppressed groups in this country. On the other hand, armed self-defense seems like the most direct way to meet the racist and indifferent state for colonial authorities to get immediate results. On the other hand, nonviolent action and on a lesser note, gradual improvements have been argued as a way to more effectively and more programmatically address the issue of disenfranchisement and injustice. If people rose up in armed self-defense, quite frankly, America would murder us all, writes the commentator. Even with the slim chance that armed defense was successful, our society would be even more bitterly divided and crumble beneath its own division. Nevertheless, the impulse to embrace self-defense comes from the reality of powerlessness in the face of direct oppression. The film provides a depth of intellectual material that could be written into multiple think pieces. We see the Shakespearean masterstroke that creates this critical conflict on a few levels. The sin of the fathers comes to define their children. Both the Black Panther and his cousin and adversary, Killmonger, are driven by their father's actions and perspectives. 2, this sets up the dichotomy of isolationism versus global conquest. And 3, there's an antagonism between tradition and modernity, between whether to maintain their isolationist ways or to join the international community and potentially trade their vibranium-based technology or use it to intervene to protect and support oppressed people across the globe. For me, like all good superhero stories, Black Panther reaches beyond present circumstances to discover the means necessary to maintain hope. Hope in the sense that there is an important response to make to all that challenges us, even if winning the day doesn't seem possible. In this sense, as Cornel West reminds us, hope becomes a virtue. He comments, Jeffrey Stout, the great philosopher of our day, says, hope is not a mood, it's a virtue. We have a right to be in as dark a mood as we want because things are indeed bleak. But hope is a virtue, which is to say, it's an excellence that we aspire to. No matter how dark our mood is, you still have a responsibility to aspire to the virtuous. Hope is the refusal to succumb to despair and nihilism. So I think, are the potential purposes behind the story of Esther all that different from the stories that we're telling today? Also consider the analogy that Esther is a Jewish Harry Potter. Consider critically, commenting critically on Rabbi Moshe Rosenberg's The Unofficial Muggle Megillah, Ashley Jacob writes, in order for Harry to defeat Voldemort and unite the Three Hallows to become the master of death, Dumbledore plans for heroine Hermione to figure out the symbol in the book he left her in his will. And he gives Ron the Deluminator with the power to transport him back to Harry and Hermione when he leaves out of anger because Dumbledore knows he would want to come back. Dumbledore also imparts the knowledge onto Snape that Voldemort needs to kill Harry first before he can be destroyed. Harry doesn't lay his plans meticulously before entering the fray. He isn't expecting to sacrifice himself at all. War is war and unexpected stuff happens. The only thing he plans while walking to the forest to meet his assumed death is telling Neville that Nagani has been killed. That's it. As Mordecai did with Esther, Dumbledore encouraged Harry to embrace his gifts, with Rabbi Rosenberg so poignantly pointed out on pages 36 through 37 to great effect. This was Ashley Jacobs' favorite part because Rosenberg writes about the unification of love as Harry's ultimate weapon that was great and even enhanced the magic of that scene. The role of unifying love seems to me the most inspiring aspect of both Harry Potter and the story of Esther and Black Panther. Esther's love for Mordecai, her love for her people, her love for God, though this is assumed and not explicitly mentioned. It's another classic story of good versus evil, but what are we to make of the violence at the end of the book? Well, what do we make of the violence in the tales we just explored? Warring with forces of evil is not a new phenomenon, as allegory for the great struggle to fight for justice and liberation, or perhaps health in the face of disease. There is always a battle. Problem comes when we take such tales as justification for doing the very violence they depict against others. Here I'm mindful of the commentary about Black Panther. If people rose up in armed self-defense, quite frankly, America would murder all of us. Even with the slim chance that armed defense was successful, our society would be even more bitterly divided and crumble beneath its own division. Nevertheless, the impulse to embrace self-defense comes from the reality of powerlessness in the face of direct oppression. This perhaps makes the most sense, and it aligns with a modern midrash on the tale of Esther as well. In the end, perhaps we might respond to the massacre in accordance with Esther Rabbah, in her major collection of midrash on the book. The last midrash of the collection begins with the appreciation of awe for God, who allows the murdered to kill murderers, the crucified to crucify their crucifiers, and the drowned to drown their drowners, the latter being reference to the crossing of the Red Sea. And then goes on to declare God's abundance of mercy, loving kindness, justice, and goodness. The Midrash closes with an extended ode to peace, perhaps intended as a subtle critique of the bloodshed with which the Megillah Esther itself concludes. So, what if the story was a critique of itself? A critique in disguise. What if reading the entire story gives us both the energy to fight for liberation and justice, especially during times when we feel powerless? And what if it is also stood as a reminder that the means by which we engage the battle either perpetuates the injustice we seek to address, or it establishes peace? I'll leave it to you to ponder. Ashe. Amen. And blessed be. Please join in our closing hymn, Rock of Ages, Let Our Song. like to invite my colleague, Cheryl Lachey, to join us for our litany. Please join together in those words which are bolded. Thou whose kingdom is within,
may all thy names be hallowed. May no one of them be turned against the others to divide those who address thee.
may thy presence be made known to us in mercy, beauty, love, and justice. May thy kingdom come to be in the life of all humankind.
May it come with peace, with sharing, and in a near time. Give us this day our daily bread, free from all envy and alienation.
Broken and blessed in the sharing. Keep us from trespass against others and from the feeling that others are trespassing against us.
Forgive us more than we have forgiven. Deliver us from being tempted by lesser things, to be heedless of the one great thing.
The gift of thyself in us. Amen. Our benediction this morning are the words of my colleague, William Sinkford. Spirit of life and love, dear God of all nations, there is so much work to do. We've only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Help us hold fast to our vision of what can be. May we see the hope in our history and find the courage and the voice to work for that constant rebirth of freedom and justice. That is our dream. Amen.
Stand for a tale so grand. Shushan is the place where it all began. The hidden miracle. One man, second in command. Slay all the Jews with his wicked plan. A scheme so miserable. He chose a day for the disaster. It's ironic what came after. He didn't know a girl named Esther would turn it upside down. So raise your glass if you can see the hidden meaning. It's right in front of you. We will never be anything but proud to tell the story. Then now for who? Won't you come on and raise your glass? Just come on and raise your glass. Esther became the queen because God was pulling strings from behind the scenes. She wore the royal crown. 3 days the Jews just prayed. Queen Esther risked her life, went to save the day. She took Haman down. The streets were filled with celebration. Everyone ate hamantashen. Jubilation for the nation. So raise your glass if you can see the hidden meaning. It's right in front of you. We will never be anything but proud to tell the story. Then now for who? Won't you come on and raise your glass? Just come on and raise your glass. Won't you come on and raise your glass? Just come on and raise your glass. So get your costumes on, make noise and drown out Haman. Don't drink like a fool, and remember what the day's about. So raise your...
Wait, cut. Was that the door? Can I help you guys?
I heard there was a party here, man!
I think you have the wrong house.
Wait! Let's play this important.
Come on in!
So raise your glass if you see God in hidden places. He's right in front of you. We will never be anything more proud.